Chosen one, the bank has approved your money. Check now. If you are hearing this message now, it is because you are aligned with a moment of confirmation. The words, "the bank has approved your money," are not just about numbers or accounts. They speak to a phase of resolution after a long period of waiting, pressure, and internal recalibration. For the chosen one, approval does not arrive suddenly or randomly. It arrives when endurance, timing, and inner readiness converge. This message is about recognition that something you have been carrying, trusting, and preparing for is now moving from delay into decision, from uncertainty into release. What was once pending is now shifting into form. Before we go deeper, stay with this message until the very end, because each part unfolds meaning that builds clarity. If this resonates with you, write your warmest wishes in the comments and include 144 as a symbol of alignment and focused intention, allowing this moment to be acknowledged and energized as part of a shared field of awareness. For the chosen one, financial approval is rarely just financial. It represents validation after restraint, movement after stagnation, and relief after sustained responsibility. You may have felt for a long time that progress was being held just out of reach, not denied, but delayed. This delay was not punishment, it was positioning. Approval comes when you are no longer desperate for it, when you are grounded enough to receive without fear and wise enough to manage without losing yourself. This phase often follows a period of internal tightening. You may have learned to budget energy, not just money. You may have been forced to prioritize, simplify, or say no where you once overextended. These adjustments were not setbacks. They were preparation. The chosen one is shaped before they are supplied. Approval arrives when stability is internal, not just external. There is also a deeper lesson in timing. You may notice that when approval finally arrives, it aligns with a clearer sense of direction. You are not scrambling, you are not rushing. There is an inner calm that allows you to respond rather than react. This is how you know you are ready. Resources given too early distort focus. Resources given at the right moment amplify purpose. This message also speaks to trust restored. Perhaps there were moments when you doubted systems, institutions, or processes beyond your control. Perhaps waiting tested your patience and confidence. Approval now represents a quiet correction. It reminds you that not everything unseen is inactive. Some processes move silently until they are complete. For the chosen one, money is energy with responsibility attached. When approval comes, it carries an expectation, not of perfection, but of awareness. You are meant to use what arrives with clarity, not fear. With intention, not impulse. This phase invites you to step into a more conscious relationship with material support, one that serves stability rather than distraction. You may also notice an emotional release tied to this moment. Tension you did not realize you were holding begins to soften. The mind becomes less preoccupied. Space opens for creativity, rest, and forward thinking. This is not because money solves everything, but because relief allows you to breathe again. And clarity often follows breath. Approval is also symbolic of alignment between effort and outcome. You showed up when results were uncertain. You remained consistent when feedback was minimal. That consistency mattered. The chosen one's work is often invisible until it is undeniable. This moment is not luck. It is accumulation. It is important to stay grounded here. Approval does not mean the journey is over. It means a new phase begins, one that requires stewardship. How you respond now shapes what comes next. Calm decisions compound stability. Rushed decisions recreate pressure. The chosen one understands this instinctively. There is also a quiet empowerment in knowing you no longer need to chase what is now confirmed. Energy shifts from pursuit to planning, from survival to strategy, from anxiety to intention. This transition is subtle but profound. It changes how you walk, think, and choose. You may feel a renewed sense of self-respect emerging, not pride, but recognition. Recognition that you endured without losing integrity, that you waited without collapsing into fear. Approval affirms that this restraint was not wasted. This moment also reminds you that external confirmation often arrives after internal alignment. When you stopped forcing, something began flowing. When you stopped proving, something began approving. This is not coincidence. It is sequence. Stay present in this phase. Do not rush to spend, explain, or announce. Let the reality settle. Let your nervous system adjust to the shift from holding to receiving. The chosen one knows that true security is not in the amount, but in the steadiness with which it is handled. What has been approved is more than money. It is movement. It is permission to step forward without the weight you were carrying before. And as this phase opens, it invites you to move with clarity, discipline, and quiet confidence, knowing that what arrives now is meant to support, not distract, the path ahead. As this confirmation settles in, the chosen one begins to notice a shift that goes beyond the initial relief. There is a subtle reorientation of focus, as if the mind is no longer fixated on survival, but is slowly opening toward possibility. When pressure eases, perspective expands. You may find yourself thinking further ahead, considering options that once felt unrealistic or premature. This is not impulsiveness. It is the natural response to stability returning. This phase brings awareness of responsibility in a new form, not burden, but stewardship. You may sense that what has been approved is not meant to be rushed through or treated casually. The chosen one understands, often without being told, that resources are tools, not trophies. They are meant to support structure, growth, and continuity. This understanding keeps decisions grounded and measured. There is also a noticeable change in how you relate to time. Urgency softens. You no longer feel pushed to solve everything at once. Approval creates space, and in that space, patience becomes accessible again. The chosen one recognizes that haste often comes from fear, and fear loses its grip when stability is restored. You may begin to reflect on the period that came before this moment. The waiting, the uncertainty, the internal negotiations you had with yourself. These reflections are not meant to reopen wounds, but to integrate lessons. The chosen one does not erase hardship. They extract wisdom from it. What you learned during restraint now informs how you move during expansion. This phase often brings a clearer sense of boundaries. You may feel less inclined to justify your choices or explain your plans. There is a quiet confidence that allows you to keep certain things private, not out of secrecy, but out of discernment. The chosen one knows that not every stage requires an audience. Another shift occurs in how you assess risk. You are no longer acting from desperation, nor from excess confidence. There is a balanced awareness of consequence and opportunity. Approval brings choice, and choice demands clarity. This is where the chosen one's discipline becomes visible, even if unspoken. You may also notice emotional stabilization. The highs are calmer, the lows are less consuming. This does not mean life becomes flat. It means it becomes steadier. Approval removes a background tension that once colored everything. With that tension gone, emotional responses regain proportion. This is also a time when integrity matters more than ever. You may feel an internal check when considering decisions that do not align with your values, even if they seem advantageous. The chosen one understands that compromise made in moments of expansion often creates future contraction. Alignment remains the priority. There can be a renewed sense of self-trust developing here. You handled pressure before. You remained functional when resources were uncertain. This memory becomes a source of quiet strength. Approval does not erase your resilience. It confirms it. You know now that you can navigate both scarcity and support. As this phase continues, planning becomes more intentional. Goals are no longer driven by escape, but by direction. You may feel drawn to create systems rather than quick fixes, foundations rather than temporary solutions. The chosen one thinks in terms of sustainability, not just relief. You may also become more selective about where you invest your energy, financially, emotionally, mentally. Approval sharpens awareness of exchange. What gives return? What drains? This discernment is not rigid but informed. It reflects growth. There is often a quiet gratitude present during this time, not performative, not loud, but steady. Gratitude that comes from understanding how close uncertainty once felt. This gratitude anchors humility and prevents complacency. This stage is not about celebration. It is about calibration, adjusting to a new level of stability without losing clarity. The chosen one does this instinctively, allowing the moment to integrate before moving too far ahead. Approval is not the end of the story. It is a transition point, and how you move through this transition determines the quality of what follows. Calm, awareness, and discipline now carry more weight than urgency ever did. What has shifted externally is now being matched internally. And as this alignment continues, the chosen one steps forward not with haste, but with intention, ready to build from a place of steadiness rather than strain. As this new phase continues to unfold, the chosen one begins to experience a deeper recalibration of identity. When resources were uncertain, identity was often shaped around endurance, restraint, and caution. Now, with approval confirmed, there is space to redefine how you see yourself, not as someone waiting for permission, but as someone trusted with responsibility. This shift happens quietly, without announcement, but it changes how you carry yourself. There is often a moment of internal testing during this stage, not from the outside, but from within. You may notice old habits resurfacing briefly, impulses to overcompensate, to rush, or to prove something. These moments are not failures. They are checkpoints. The chosen one recognizes them as reminders of how far they have come. Awareness replaces reaction, and restraint becomes a conscious choice rather than a forced one. This phase also deepens your understanding of value, not just the value of money, but the value of effort, time, and attention. You may become less tolerant of waste, wasted energy, wasted commitments, wasted distractions. Approval sharpens perception. The chosen one sees more clearly what deserves investment and what does not. There is a noticeable strengthening of self-leadership here. Decisions feel more grounded, less emotionally charged. You are less influenced by urgency or external noise. This does not mean you detach from reality. It means you engage with it from a centered position. The chosen one learns that stability allows for clearer judgment. You may also find that your standards rise, not in a rigid or elitist way, but in a discerning one. You may expect more consistency from yourself and others. This is not about control. It is about alignment. Approval often reveals where standards were previously lowered out of necessity. Now, they can be reset with intention. This stage often brings clarity around long-term direction. Not detailed plans, but a general sense of where energy should be directed. You may feel less scattered, less tempted by paths that once seemed appealing but lacked substance. The chosen one understands that not every opportunity is meant to be taken, especially when focus is required. There can also be a renewed respect for process. You know now that waiting served a purpose, that not everything can or should be accelerated. This respect tempers ambition with wisdom. Approval does not make you reckless. It makes you deliberate. Emotionally, there is a quiet strengthening. Confidence becomes less reactive and more stable. You are less shaken by minor setbacks or opinions. The chosen one does not confuse approval with invincibility. You remain aware, grounded, and adaptable. This phase may also bring a subtle shift in how others respond to you. Not because you announce anything, but because your energy changes. There is less urgency, less explanation, less seeking. Presence becomes more composed. People often sense this before they understand it. There is also an invitation here to refine habits, not dramatically, but intentionally. The chosen one understands that small, consistent choices now have greater impact. Structure becomes supportive rather than restrictive. Routine becomes a stabilizing force rather than a limitation. As this stage matures, gratitude deepens into responsibility. You are aware that what you have now must be maintained through awareness, not entitlement. This keeps you grounded and prevents complacency. Approval is respected, not assumed. This is a phase of quiet consolidation. Nothing flashy, nothing rushed, just steady integration of support into daily life. The chosen one allows this phase to do its work, understanding that true stability is built through consistency, not intensity. What has been approved externally is now being matched by internal readiness. And as this alignment strengthens, the chosen one moves forward with clarity, no longer shaped by scarcity, but guided by intention, discipline, and calm confidence. As this alignment continues to settle, the chosen one begins to operate from a place of internal steadiness rather than reaction. The need to constantly assess safety, risk, or urgency fades into the background. In its place comes a calm attentiveness. You are present with what you have, aware of what you are building, and no longer distracted by what once felt missing. This shift marks a turning point, where life feels less like a test and more like a process you are actively shaping. There is a noticeable refinement in decision-making during this phase. Choices are no longer driven by relief or fear of loss. Instead, they are guided by long-term coherence. You may find yourself pausing more before acting, not out of doubt, but out of clarity. The chosen one understands that stability allows for thoughtful pacing, and thoughtful pacing protects what has been gained. This stage often reveals how much of your past effort was spent managing uncertainty. With that weight lifted, mental space opens. Creativity returns. Strategic thinking sharpens. You may feel more capable of seeing connections, patterns, and opportunities that were previously obscured by pressure. Approval does not just free resources, it frees attention. You may also notice a change in how you relate to responsibility. It no longer feels heavy or restrictive. Responsibility becomes an extension of self-respect. You take care of what has been entrusted to you because it reflects who you are becoming. The chosen one does not need reminders to be careful. Awareness naturally informs behavior. There is often an increased sense of emotional regulation here. Stress responses soften. You recover more quickly from disruptions. Even when challenges arise, they do not destabilize you as they once might have. This resilience is not accidental. It is the result of having already navigated difficulty without support. Now, with support present, your capacity feels expanded. This phase also highlights the importance of consistency. Not dramatic moves, not sudden leaps, but steady follow-through. The chosen one understands that stability is preserved through repetition of aligned choices. What you do daily now matters more than what you do occasionally. You may become more selective with commitments. Time feels more valuable, not because it is scarce, but because it is no longer consumed by stress. You choose where to place your attention with greater care. Approval brings the freedom to say no without guilt, and yes, without hesitation. There is also a subtle shift in self-perception. You may begin to see yourself as capable in ways you previously underestimated. Not because circumstances improved, but because your response to them did. The chosen one recognizes their own reliability. You know you can handle responsibility without losing balance. This stage can also bring clarity around excess. You may naturally simplify finances, routines, environments, not out of lack, but out of intention. The chosen one understands that clarity often comes from removing what is unnecessary. Approval does not require expansion in every direction. It invites precision. As this phase continues, trust deepens. Not blind trust, but informed trust. Trust in your judgment. Trust in your pacing. Trust in your ability to adjust when needed. The chosen one no longer fears missteps because they know correction is always possible. There is a growing sense of internal quiet, not emptiness, but calm. The background noise of worry fades. This quiet allows you to hear your own priorities more clearly. Approval supports this silence by removing constant mental pressure. This stage is not marked by external milestones. It is marked by internal stability. The chosen one may not feel the need to announce progress or seek confirmation. What matters is that life feels more coherent, more intentional, more manageable. What has been approved has now been integrated into your way of living. And as this integration stabilizes, the chosen one moves forward with measured confidence, aware that true security is not held in what arrives, but in how consistently and consciously it is maintained. As this phase deepens, the chosen one begins to experience a more embodied sense of control. Not control over outcomes, but over response. You are no longer moved as easily by fluctuations, delays, or external opinions. There is a growing recognition that stability is not something you chase. It is something you practice. Approval has created conditions where this practice can finally take root. This stage often brings a clearer relationship with discipline. Discipline no longer feels like restraint imposed from the outside. It feels like self-alignment. You begin to notice how small, consistent choices quietly reinforce stability. The chosen one understands that what protects progress is not intensity, but repetition. Simple habits, when maintained, become powerful anchors. There is also a noticeable shift in how you approach growth. You are less interested in shortcuts or sudden leaps. Growth becomes something you cultivate deliberately. You may feel drawn to strengthening foundations rather than expanding too quickly. Approval invites patience, and patience reveals long-term vision. Emotionally, This phase brings a deeper sense of balance. You are less reactive to temporary discomfort and less attached to temporary pleasure. The chosen one does not numb or chase. They observe and adjust. Emotional awareness becomes practical rather than overwhelming. This stage also sharpens discernment around influence. You may become more aware of how environments, conversations, and even information streams affect your state of mind. The chosen one begins to curate their inputs more intentionally. Not everything deserves access to your attention. You may notice that confidence now expresses itself through calm boundaries. You do not need to assert yourself aggressively or explain your reasoning repeatedly. Decisions are communicated clearly, without excess justification. Approval reinforces the understanding that clarity does not require defense. There is often a subtle increase in self-respect during this phase. You trust yourself to follow through. You trust yourself to pause when needed. This trust is built from evidence that you have navigated uncertainty and remained intact. Approval confirms what you already proved internally. This stage may also bring a renewed sense of order, not rigidity, but structure that supports freedom. Systems begin to form, ways of managing resources, time, and energy that reduce friction. The chosen one understands that structure is not limiting when it is self-designed. There is a growing awareness of momentum here. Not the frantic kind, but the steady kind that builds through consistency. Progress feels quieter, but more reliable. You are no longer starting and stopping as often. Approval stabilizes movement. You may also feel less inclined to compare your path to others. Comparison loses relevance when direction is clear. The chosen one understands that alignment creates its own metrics. Success is measured internally, by coherence and sustainability. This phase often brings a calm satisfaction. Not celebration, not complacency, but a grounded sense that things are in their proper place. You are not waiting for something to validate you. You are already engaged in building something real. There is also an increased tolerance for delay, when delay is purposeful. You no longer interpret waiting as failure. The chosen one recognizes that timing continues to matter, even after approval. Some actions still require readiness. As this stage matures, life feels less reactive and more intentional. You are shaping routines, making decisions, and allocating resources with awareness. Approval has shifted from being an event to being a condition, one that supports steady progress rather than sudden change. This is the phase where stability becomes self-sustaining. The chosen one no longer depends on constant reassurance. You trust the systems you've built, the discipline you maintain, and the clarity you've earned. And from this place, movement forward becomes not only possible, but sustainable. As this final phase settles in, the chosen one realizes that what truly changed was never just the external situation, but the internal relationship with stability itself. Approval was not the destination. It was the signal that a certain chapter of strain, waiting, and uncertainty had completed its work. Now, life is approached from a position of grounded presence rather than constant anticipation. There is a calm authority that defines this stage. Not dominance, not control, but a steady confidence rooted in self-knowledge. You trust your judgment because it has been tested. You trust your pacing because it has been earned. Even when outcomes remain undefined, direction feels clear. The chosen one no longer mistakes uncertainty for danger. This phase is marked by integration. The lessons learned during restriction and the discipline developed through waiting are now fully embodied. You do not abandon caution, but you no longer operate from fear. You move forward with awareness, knowing that balance is maintained through attention, not tension. There is also a deep acceptance of responsibility without heaviness. You understand that what you maintain now shapes what continues to flow. This does not feel like pressure. It feels like alignment. The chosen one recognizes that stewardship is a form of self-respect. At this stage, life feels quieter but more intentional. There is less internal noise, less mental bargaining, less second-guessing. Decisions are made with clarity and followed through without hesitation. When adjustments are needed, they are made without self-criticism. Stability allows for correction without collapse. You may notice that your sense of worth is no longer tied to approval, outcomes, or validation. What was confirmed externally has already been internalized. The chosen one no longer needs proof to feel secure. Security has become a state rather than a condition. This phase also brings a refined understanding of momentum. You are not rushing to create more. You are sustaining what already exists. Growth continues, but it is measured, deliberate, and rooted in consistency. The chosen one values durability over speed. There is a natural confidence in how you carry yourself now. You speak less, but with more intention. You act without excess explanation. Presence alone communicates stability. This is not something you try to project. It is something you embody. In this final integration, you understand that approval did not change who you are. It revealed who you had already become. Someone capable of waiting without breaking, receiving without losing balance, and moving forward without abandoning clarity. What lies ahead no longer feels uncertain in a threatening way. It feels open. And with a reliable inner compass now firmly in place, the chosen one steps into what comes next. Not with urgency, but with calm, sustained confidence, ready to continue building from a foundation that is steady, conscious, and real. As the journey continues beyond this point, the chosen one begins to recognize something subtle, yet powerful. Stability is no longer something that needs to be protected constantly. It has become internalized. The fear of losing what was gained fades, replaced by confidence in your ability to adapt, rebuild, and recalibrate if necessary. This is a crucial realization. True security is not fragile when it is rooted in awareness rather than circumstance. At this stage, there is a deeper trust in process. You understand that flow includes pauses, adjustments, and even occasional setbacks. These no longer threaten your sense of progress. The chosen one knows that momentum does not disappear simply because it slows. It reshapes itself. This understanding allows you to remain composed even when conditions shift. There is also a growing sense of personal authority over your own life narrative. You no longer define yourself by what happened during difficult periods, nor do you over-identify with moments of approval or success. Both are seen as phases, not identities. This perspective creates emotional freedom. You are no longer anchored to a single outcome or story about yourself. You may notice that your reactions to external pressure are minimal now. Situations that once triggered urgency, comparison, or self-doubt pass through with little disturbance. This is not detachment from life, but engagement without entanglement. The chosen one remains involved without being consumed. This phase brings a refined sense of patience, not waiting passively, but allowing things to unfold without interference. You act when action is required, and remain still when stillness is appropriate. This balance is intuitive now. You no longer second-guess timing as often. You feel when it is time to move and when it is time to hold. There is also an increased sense of clarity around contribution. You may begin to think less about what you need to gain and more about how you want to operate in the world. This is not self-sacrifice. It is alignment. The chosen one understands that meaningful contribution flows naturally from stability, not from depletion. You may find that your standards for engagement continue to rise. You are selective, not because you feel superior, but because you value coherence. This discernment reflects growth, not distance, and allows your energy to remain focused and intact.